Meanwhile, transatlantic tensions soar over Ukraine. Emmanuel Macron will tomorrow in Paris meet with the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and US Envoy Steve Witkoff. The US State Department's confirmed the pair are coming to Paris to discuss peace in Ukraine. This comes after a deadly Russian ballistic missile and cluster bomb strike on Sumy killed at least 35 civilians, including children, at the weekend. And the strike on Volodymyr Zelensky's birthplace, Kryvyi Rih, killed 19, including 9 children, on April the 4th. Witkoff, who recently met with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Rubio, headed then to Paris for talks on ending the war in Ukraine, all confirmed by the State Department. Part of Trump's push for a ceasefire in Ukraine that's yet to bear fruit in spite of his pledges to end the war quickly. Let's bring in Keraman Gorgistani for more on the situation. Really, Trump said he'd solve the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. I mean, clearly that was a long shot at best. What are we thinking is happening next with Rubio and Witkoff coming to Paris?
Well, look, the context of this trip for Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff is really the fact that you're getting hints that the Trump administration is getting a bit frustrated by not being able to secure that deal because, of course, Donald Trump, as you said, vowed and pledged that he would end it, that he could easily end it. And of course, we're very close to the 100 days of Donald Trump for his second term. And so he really wants a deal. Now, the frustration is sometimes directed at Vladimir Zelensky, sometimes at Vladimir Putin. We saw Donald Trump going back and forth again on that war. We heard him saying that Russia needed to get moving, and then just a day later blamed Zelensky in public, saying that it was Zelensky who started the war with the help of Joe Biden. And this back and forth is something that is of concern for the Europeans and, of course, for France. And there's also concern about Steve Witkoff himself, because he has become really the go-to person for Donald Trump when it comes to foreign policy matters, especially Ukraine, even though technically there's someone else who is the U.S. envoy for Ukraine. That's Keith Kellogg. He's been put aside because Steve Witkoff is seen as really Donald Trump's man. The problem, especially for Ukrainians and for Ukraine's allies, is that Steve Witkoff has showed that he's very much on Russia's side, if you will, at least rhetorically. He's talked about what a good guy Vladimir Putin is. He came back of that latest meeting saying he had a great discussion with Vladimir Putin. There's concern because he often repeats some of the rhetoric and the talking points of the Kremlin. Just most recently talking about the so-called 5 territories that would be the key to a peace deal, of course, talking about those eastern Ukrainian regions as well as Crimea. And this is something that the Ukrainians and the Europeans say is a no-no. And so what the Europeans, especially Emmanuel Macron, is going to try to do is convince Steve Witkoff more than Marco Rubio that this is not necessarily the way to go, that maybe showing them and showing him that Vladimir Putin is not playing game, because the Ukrainians agreed to a ceasefire, and it is the Russians that are currently holding on. And of course, for Emmanuel Macron, it's sort of bringing back this idea that he's sort of the leader of the so-called coalition of the willing, that he is the one who's bringing this coordinated European response when it comes to Ukraine.